Hi, this is Bart Mixon, a special makeup effects artist, and you are listening to the Movie Rate Show.
It's time for the movie rate. Tonight's victim is Bart Mixon, special makeup effects artist that has done many films such as RoboCop, Stephen King's It, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, a countless and countless of others. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Good to be here.
Fantastic, man. So what have we been up to? Any new works that people have yet to check out?
Oh, let's see. Thor Love and Thunder's in theaters now. What's coming up? I worked on Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which will be out next summer. The Haunted Mansion, which will be out sometime between now and next year. It might even come out this Halloween, although I'm not sure. There's a Ryan Murphy, Jeffrey Dahmer show called Monster, and something called Babylon, which is the guy that did La La Land. It's his next film, and it's the film industry, like late 20s, transitioning into sound movies. So that's everything that comes to mind.
Also have the It documentary that's still in circulation in terms of promotion. Can you tell just a little bit of it? Not to spoil it too much to you guys, but just a little bit what we can taste for in terms of your involvement with that.
Yes, I believe the official title is Pennywise, the Story of It, and it's from Dead Mouse Productions, British group, and then they also partnered up with John Campiano, who's from Boston. He's also a documentary filmmaker. The Dead Mouse folks had contacted me years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, about a Fright Night 2 documentary they were doing called You're So Cool, Brewster, and they also interviewed me for a RoboCop one that hopefully will be out soon called RoboDoc, but somewhere being interviewed for those projects, I had mentioned that I had not only a pretty extensive photo file of my work from It, but also 2 hours of home video that I shot on the set, back in 1990 that literally nobody had seen. So I think that kind of lit a spark for them, and I think they were interested in doing an It documentary anyway, but I think just suddenly having access to like this unseen footage, Tommy Lee Wallace directing Tim Curry, and you got John Ritter goofing around with our big spider puppet, just all kinds of fun stuff.
I think it's important to show this, like Roddy McDowall from Planet of the Apes, when he's showing the process of the makeup and what he had to go through and so forth, just like with what we've seen a little bit of It. It's almost becoming a slow burn, like we're just now getting some, extra footage that we never actually saw. Do you think that's more of importance so that, not just for moviegoers, but do you think this is a good way of the process of upcoming artists, or do you think this is just something that the do's and don'ts mostly, or anything might be different than that?
Like when we did the original It, I don't think that was 1990s. I don't think they really expected people to still be talking about it 30 years from now. Fortunately, with a lot of more films these days, like I worked on the first Men in Black, and I remember they had like an electronic press kit crew going around doing behind the scenes footage. Anyway, so I think now that they're doing more of these franchise type movies, the Marvel films and all that stuff, they are more conscientious about documenting the making of and that sort of thing. So we're always, I think on like I just did the Haunted Mansion, the Disney remake of that, and they did have their behind the scenes folks come in and record the makeup sessions one day. They may never use it, but it's there just in case they do need it. When I was on Men in Black 2, they videotaped me doing the application on one makeup, and the only place I've ever seen that was at the end of a Men in Black 1 DVD where they had an ad for that Men in Black 2 is coming out on DVD, and it was just like part of the teaser promoting this video. So you never know where this stuff's going to turn up. Things being digital now, it's easier to not only record it but just to warehouse it, so they don't you don't have like big spools of film. Now you've got little flash drives or whatever the hell, memory cards or whatever they're keeping it on, hard drives. It doesn't take up the space that it used to. So, then just for educational reasons, it is good that this stuff's accessible so that people can see how things were made and all the hell we went through to do it. So
you've done so many jobs in your career, having to take a low paying or even having to work for free type of job. Do you think artists in their craft in today's business makes it harder to be self-aware or even limited to make their own success?
There's never, I guess, any one path to get to where you want to go, but certainly any experience is valuable and you should be able to take something from it. So I certainly, early on in my career, I certainly did my share of, if not for free, for cost type stuff. But again, it would either build my portfolio or it would just give me some experience that I could use down the line. I've been in the makeup union since 1994, and they do kind of set rates and stuff like that, but there have been instances where I'm happy to help out a friend. I might take like a lesser rate or or I helped a friend with a demo makeup a year or so ago for free. So it depends on what the work is. But everything you do, when you work with different people, you're picking up new techniques. Maybe you're reinforcing, your skills. I was just on Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and most of the makeups we did on that were two-man makeups, and the department head liked to kind of mix the teams up. You'd work with one guy for a week or two on a specific character, and then when a new wave of characters came in, they would mix up the pairings. And so I worked with seasoned professionals that were probably in the business as long or longer than me, but then I was also working with some pretty green people who were certainly excellent artists, but they did say, like, wow, I'd never applied foam latex. I didn't know you could apply it that way. Or I think particularly some of the younger ones that I walked away from working with me did comment that they learned a couple of things. So, and I think that's why this guy, why our department head was mixing up the grouping so that we could kind of share information and help people and just see what, you never know what kind of dynamics, what results you're going to get from mixing up the dynamics. So it's all educational, it's all learning. So nothing wrong with that. It's all good.
Working with many companies in your career, does credibility change based on what you've done from projects, or even limit capability based on who you've worked for or what that particular project was, in terms of either reputation or just for the sake of what kind of work you've mainly done?
Yeah, I mean, your body of work speaks for you. A lot of it is kind of who you know. I mean, I met Rick Baker in 1977. I didn't start working for him until 1987, but he knew me, friends, and he was comfortable with me, so that when I did start working for him, there was already a relationship there. But also, I didn't start at the bottom. When I started at his shop and on Gorillas in the Mist, but then the next thing I was on Gremlins 2, and I was his shop foreman. When I met Rick in 77, he introduced me to Rob Bottin in 78, who Rob then called me 8 years later to work on RoboCop, just out of the blue, literally at midnight, on a Saturday when I was still living in Houston, and they were shooting RoboCop in Dallas. But Rob probably wouldn't have reached out to me had I not been introduced, and we'd had a relationship, not a real strong one, but he knew, he was aware of, and that was thanks to this introduction from Rick 8 years earlier. Certainly a lot of stuff that I work on, particularly more so these days, it's either people that I've worked for before, or it's working with friends. Several of the shops I do a lot of work for currently, I've known these guys for years. When I got the call to work on Bad Grandpa, Steve Prouty was heading it up, and he was just like, hey, it's going to be me and this mutual friend Will. And I don't even know if he had mentioned that it was a Johnny Knoxville thing, but he was just like, hey, you want to come work with us? And I'm like, yes. That's all I needed to hear. So more so lately, it's almost more about working with my friends than anything else. So yeah, I mean, you do develop a reputation, and people are pulling on that, or drawing from that. But same thing, I was on Obi-Wan Kenobi last year, and I was heading up the prosthetics, the on-set prosthetics department, and came time to staff it. They're like, oh, who do you want working with you? So of course you're going to mention names that not only are good artists, but they're people that work well with. Because I have heard of plenty of instances where they will hire one person over another not because the second guy wasn't a good artist, but just because he's a pain in the ass to work with. And sometimes it's not worth it. But anyway, so yeah, I like to think that I've got a reputation for both being knowing what I'm doing, but also being, I guess, a team player and easy to get along with, and not a drama queen and that sort of stuff. So hopefully I'm
working within mid-budget to low-budget films, or even higher-budget films. Does choices of that artist's work become limited to create character, or even give more creative choices in comparing to the more higher-budget films?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just don't have the money to do what you want to do. Like digital effects first came out, when those were becoming popular in the 90s. They do a lot of what I used to call a digital reveal. I don't know if there's a technical term for it, but you already have the prosthetic, like Passion of the Christ, all the whipping on Jesus's back. They had those prosthetics on there, and then they digitally removed them, and then as the guy hit him with the whip, then they would reveal the makeup, and it looked like, oh geez, where did this come from? And it looked great, but I'd wanted to do that for the last 8 or 10 years of my own projects, but just the budget didn't allow. So I'd mention it to the production, and they'd be like, well, we're paying a makeup guy, what are we paying a digital guy for too? So yeah, sometimes you definitely are, your choices are dictated by your budget. I did a show for Brian Usna, Necronomicon, where I made a lot of stuff out of latex and polyfoam, because that's all we could afford. I mean, normally I would have done foam latex, but we didn't have the budget for that. Silicone is a very popular material now, but it's also pretty expensive. If you have the budget, you might do a full body suit for something. But if you don't have the budget, then you're going to be sitting there with doing paint, more out of the kit stuff. So definitely the budget will, just to some degree, will dictate your approach and how complex you can get with stuff. As another example, I remember I did some UFO aliens for the Kyoto Brothers for a show called Visitors from the Unknown. I mean, I thought we did a good job with them, but they were pretty simplistic just because we didn't have a lot of money. And I remember there was some other alien show on at the time that had like tricked out animatronic stuff, and it's like, well, yeah, I would have liked to have done that, but we just simply didn't have the money to do it. We couldn't do it. But that was one of the things growing up in Texas and doing low budget stuff when I first started. A lot of times I would know the correct way to do something, but I wouldn't have the means. Either I couldn't find the supplies in Texas, or I didn't have the money to get those supplies, so I would have to come up with an alternative solution that still gave comparable results. So I think it forced me and a lot of people from that generation to kind of think on your feet and be innovative, because you would have to sometimes come up with a solution that may not have been the way you would normally do it, but that's the only thing that you could, from budget or just the availability of the supplies and that sort of thing. I mean, look at like Guardians of the Galaxy that I just worked on Part 3. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of makeups on that movie. So obviously, if that wasn't a $200 million budgeted film, there wouldn't have been 80 makeup artists doing 80 makeups a day. They would have just had to make do with less. So it's definitely, impacts, that sort of thing.
Having to work with many types of appliances and different kinds of methods to use these appliances and makeups, how would you describe what could actually be inferior to a character or to applying to character?
That's a good question. Again, I mean, each makeup does require its own approach. Again, like say my Pennywise makeup with Tim Curry. My first notions about that when I was just considering doing it, my first kind of go-to, or my first thoughts, was to use a lot more rubber than I ended up using. I guess kind of more of a mask approach than an actual prosthetics and makeup. Certain requirements dictated the approach that we ended up with. I mean, both what Tim did and didn't want to wear, and just start to realize what the character is. It didn't make sense to go as heavy as my first thought. You do have to evaluate what the project is and what the script demands are. I think Coppola's Dracula is a good example. I didn't do that one. That was Greg Canham's work, and it was beautiful work, but all the incarnations of Dracula in there are all a makeup approach. The werewolf, the bat, and all the various age looks and all that. For Dracula, he chose a makeup solution, whereas another shop, particularly for the werewolf and the bat, they may have gone with like some big overblown animatronic mechanical thing. But Greg wanted to keep everything performance driven. Got Gary Oldman there. You don't want to put a big animatronic head on Gary Oldman. You want to do a cool makeup that he can then work with. Or Darkness with Tim Curry in the Darkness makeup. Even though it's a very heavy makeup, it's still Tim very much controls that and brings that to life. And you could put that same makeup on a lesser actor or on a stuntman, and you don't have the same character. So I mean, it is important, who's wearing it, and so you want to design something that's going to complement the performer and work with the performer's strengths or weaknesses or whatever. Another example I always like to use is when I was working on Nightmare on Elm Street 2, the production came super close to not bringing Robert Englund back to play Freddy, because they thought like, well, if he's in all this makeup and he's in the shadows, what do we need an actor for? Just stick it on a stuntman. I mean, I don't think we would have seen a Part 3, had they done that. And it was just amazing that here these are the people that are making the movie, and they didn't realize what value their actor was bringing to this character. I mean, you definitely want to approach these makeup going to complement the actor and the performance. I mean, if you study the way Kazu broke down the Gary Oldman Churchill makeup, he puts the rubber just where it needs to be. He's not trying to cover his whole head. He's just taking Gary Oldman and like, what's the least I got to do to turn him into Winston Churchill? Or the same like this Tom Hanks Colonel Parker makeup in Elvis. It's a really cool makeup. Still, you can still see Tom Hanks in it, but it's also a very, very heavy and turns him into this other character. So you definitely want to design things that are going to work with the performer.
Go ahead and plug in any websites or anything that you care to promote or even add to this.
I've got my own website, bartmixon.com, but it's horribly out of date. I haven't really updated it in a decade or more. I do have my Instagram page that I use as kind of an online portfolio. So if you want to see kind of what I've been up to, look me up on Instagram. So that's always just from a personal thing. But otherwise, again, like this Pennywise, the story of it is out now, and hopefully RoboDoc will be coming out sooner than later, because they want to cover the entire, not just the first RoboCop movie, which is the only one I worked on. They go into all 3 films and the TV show and the TV movies and I think the remake. But I think ultimately they decided it was going to be such a massive undertaking that now they've split it into 2 documentaries, and one of them is just about the original RoboCop, which is the good one, and then the other documentary will cover all the sequels and spin-offs and whatnot. So just keep an eye out for it. The Pennywise, the story of it. It is streaming. It's Screambox TV. It may be on some other platforms as well, but I'm not sure. But I think if you start with Screambox.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That is Bart Mixon.